G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to IL-2, the Battle of Kuban, and I can now actually say that fully, as of today, IL-2, the Battle of Kuban is now officially released, and with that release comes all the remaining aircraft that we were waiting for. So today we're going to be talking about the first of these aircraft, the Douglas A-20B Havoc. The Havoc is quite the famous aircraft. It served with the United States, Britain, Australia, France, and of course the Soviet Union, where it makes its place inside of IL-2. Now in today's video I'm going to be going over some of the technical information for the A-20B Havoc. I'm also going to be going over some of the overall handling characteristics of the aircraft. So let's start with the engine startup. From the point you hit the on switch to the point that you are ready to begin taxiing is only a minute and a half in the A-20B. This makes it an incredibly fast machine to actually get going and get into the air. Coupled with its fantastic speed in the air, which we'll talk about in a few moments, if you need a machine to get off the ground rapidly and hit a target inside a multiplayer in a real big hurry, this is the plane to do it in. Now the A-20B is powered by two Write R2611 twin cyclone engines. Now these engines will put out 1,600 horsepower apiece at sea level in combat mode, 1,400 horsepower apiece in combat mode at 11,500 feet. In cruise mode at 5,500 feet they'll put out 810, and also in cruise mode at 12,000 feet 765, and in normal operating conditions 5,500 feet 1,350 horsepower, and at 12,000 feet they'll put out 1,275 horsepower. Overall, pretty beastly engines for such a small aircraft, which is again part of the reason why this aircraft was adored by its pilots. Now in IL-2, taxiing the aircraft. This is quite simply the easiest aircraft in IL-2 to taxi around. Being a tricycle layout, the nose is low to the ground in comparison to other bombers. You can see where you're going. As you can see, it's quite clear to taxi around. Actually turning the aircraft is as simple as applying the toe brakes. This entire turn onto the runway, only using the toe brakes, and it was incredibly easy. At no point did the aircraft feel like it was trying to twist or turn outside of my control. There was a constant pull to the left, as you would expect out of the engines, but nothing that wasn't very, very easy to maintain. Now it's important to note that this is the correct way to taxi the A-20B. The nose gear on the A-20B does not have manual steering control. It orientates by itself. It also has no brakes. Brakes are only present on the left and right hand wheels, which are the correct way to steer the aircraft. Now, it is also worth mentioning while we're talking about the landing gear, the A-20B's landing gear is fit with a safety system that will prevent pilots from retracting the landing gear while the aircraft is on the ground. Also, while taxiing, the upper cowl flaps can be opened in order to keep the aircraft cool in a hot environment. However, these need to be closed before the aircraft takes off. As per the real A-20B, if these are open during flight, it will cause buffeting and vibrations across the aircraft. So that brings us to takeoff in the A-20B, and takeoff is just as easy as taxiing. For takeoff, I run the flaps at about 20% when I've got a bomb load on, upper and lower cowlings closed. Fuel mixture and RPM 100%, throttles 100% per takeoff. Now I was experimenting with the aircraft a little bit here just to see whether or not I was able to keep control of the aircraft just on rudder during the takeoff process. The aircraft has very little rudder authority until the aircraft passes around 80 miles per hour or around 130 kilometers per hour. After that point you can begin transferring pressure off the brake and onto the rudder in order to maintain the aircraft straight down the runway, and you want to begin rotation for takeoff at around 105 miles per hour or around 170 kilometers per hour. Takeoff speed is around 120 miles per hour or 195 kilometers per hour. Once you clear the runway, retract the landing gear as soon as possible, and your recommended climb out speed is around 140 to 150 miles per hour or around 225 to 240 kilometers per hour. Now that of course brings us to climb rates. Now of course rate of climb changes depending on altitude. At sea level, climb rates around 10 meters per second, or 1,969 feet per minute. At 3,000 meters, 8.2 meters per second, or 1,614 feet per minute, and at 6,000 meters, 5 meters per second, or 984 feet per minute. Service ceiling for the A-20B is 8,700 meters, or 28,540 feet. Now another feature of the A-20B is it is equipped with an automatic fuel mixture system, so once you have reached your desired altitude you should pull the mixture control back to 66%. This will activate the automatic system on the auto-rich setting. Now if you're trying to conserve fuel for a long distance flight, you should pull it back to 33%. This will activate the automatic system for the auto lean setting. Now, propeller pitch in the A-20B is controlled by a governor that corresponds to the RPM setting. So you simply set your engine RPM as desired, and the propeller pitch will automatically adjust to correspond with that RPM. Now, level flight speed can vary a lot based on aircraft trim, drag, and of course altitude. So assuming you have the cowling shutters closed, you're trimmed for speed, and you are carrying only the internal bomb load with no external bombs, maximum level flight speed at sea level on normal settings is 476 km an hour or 290 miles per hour. On combat settings, it's 505 km per hour or 314 miles per hour. At 1,000 meters or 3,280 feet, that increases to 524 kilometers per hour or 326 miles per hour at combat settings. And at 5,000 meters or 16,400 feet, this peaks out at 544 kilometers an hour or 338 miles per hour in combat mode, or 525 kilometers per hour, 326 miles per hour in normal engine mode. Now, I did mention trim just a moment ago. The A-20B has trim control for all major control surfaces, so that is ailerons, elevators, and rudder, and I do recommend setting up and using these. While most servers have access to the auto level feature, learning to manually trim the aircraft for an unbalanced payload, such as if you have ordnance on one wing and not another, or for battle damage, is very important. It's very easy to set up, and it's incredibly effective with this aircraft in particular. So let's step away from the performance numbers for just a moment and actually talk about how the aircraft flies. Once you've got it off the ground and you have it trimmed correctly, it is, well, to be honest, it's one of the most beautiful aircraft in the game to fly. It handles extremely well. It's very precise on the controls. It's smooth in big looping maneuvers, and it can maneuver quite aggressively if you actually need it to, which you will see a bit later on. Even with a maximum payload, including maximum fuel and maximum bomb load, the aircraft is an absolute joy to fly. I don't see anybody having any trouble keeping this thing in the air once they've learned to get it there. Which is, again, as I've just said, it's not a particularly complicated thing to do. Now, the A-20B, of course, has 4 crew members on board. You have the pilot, you have the bombardier, who has no manual weapons control of his own, but does man the bombing station, and you have 2 defensive gunners. So, let's take a look at those now. So, first things first, let's take a look at the dorsal gunner position. This is the upper gunner. Primary armament for this gunner is a 12.7mm Mk.II 50 caliber machine gun with 390 rounds of ammunition and an 850 round per minute fire rate. While the overall ammunition count per belt is incredibly low, the reload time on the gun, as you'll see, is not overly long, and there are plenty of reloads on board the aircraft. Overall, the actual amount of coverage that the gun has is quite impressive, and the sight itself is actually probably one of the best seen in game, using a scope rather than an iron sight that you see on most other aircraft. Now, it is worth noting, since the gun is equipped with a glass scope, that it will get reflections that can potentially blind or block your view somewhat, although for the most part it's not overly bad. The gun can reach about 80 degrees of elevation, and it can be lowered down enough to shoot underneath the wings if you twist the gun around far enough to do so, although your firing arc in that position is rather limited. Ammunition, well, that fire rate does not take long to go through, as you can see, but the reloads, as I mentioned, are nice and rapid. And as it is a 50 caliber machine gun with a precise scope, it shouldn't take too many rounds to take down a target, and getting the gun on target should be very, very easy. So next we come to the belly gunner's position, and if we look behind us, we can see the dorsal gunner, or the top gunner, with his 50 cal and his ammunition supplies available. Now, the belly gunner in the A-20B is quite possibly the ballsiest gunner in the game. Now, I'm not afraid of heights, but screw doing this for a job. So the belly gunner is armed with a 7.92mm Mk.II 30 caliber machine gun with 600 rounds in a belt, 1,150 rounds per minute firing rate. The gun's readied by opening a door directly at the bottom of the aircraft and then folding the machine gun into place. Now, unlike the scope on the 50 cal above, the 7.92 is equipped with just a traditional iron sight, however it is more than sufficient for the job. The arcs of fire are somewhat more limited from the belly gunner position. That said, the gun can point almost 90 degrees directly down to be able to shoot what is directly beneath the aircraft. Overall, ammunition supply versus rate of fire, the belly gunner does enjoy a longer burst time overall, but still does need to reload the gun relatively often. The reload time is about the same as the 50 cal above and is handled in exactly the same manner. Now for players manning the belly gunner position, when the gun is locked and stowed, view out of the port side window is pretty much completely blocked by the machine gun and its mount. However, it is possible to move forward and look out of the limited view that is available out of the starboard window. So for this particular flight, we are going to be engaging a small convoy of trucks on the Kuban map. Our primary armaments is the external payload of 4 254kg general purpose Fab 250 CK bombs. These are mounted on pylons under the wings outside of the engine cowlings, as you've seen on the external shots so far. They can be set to release all together in pairs or in single drop. For this particular drop, we are releasing them one at a time. On top of these 4 250s, the A-20B can carry an internal payload of 8 Fab 100M general purpose bombs, or alternatively, with the 250s removed, it can carry up to 20 Fab 100s as a replacement loadout. Now, while we are releasing these bombs at low altitude here, I'm an attacker pilot at heart, what can I say? As I mentioned before, the A-20B does have a bomb sight, and so is fully capable of doing medium and high altitude level bombing. Now, there is another feature on the A-20B that is actually rather nice. Directly in the center of the tail, there are actually two lights. One is white and one is red. The white one is lit when the bomb doors are open, and the red one lights up for 5 seconds when a bomb is released. This is useful for both tight formation bombing, letting the plane behind you know that you're dropping, and also for those moments in multiplayer, and you know the ones I'm talking about, where you've got an escort fighter that happens to be very close to you, right at the moment that you happen to release your bombs. If your escort pilot happens to fly into the blast and get killed as a result, they no longer have any excuse. Now, of course, on top of the bomb armament, the A-20B is armed with forward-firing 12.7mm AN/M2 50 caliber machine guns with 200 rounds per gun, 850 rounds per minute firing rate. These guns are mounted just underneath the bombardier's position in the nose of the aircraft. And as you can see, these are extremely effective. In fact, they're probably one of the easiest guns to use for ground strafing in the game. This is because they are nose mounted, and because of the elevated position of the gun sight in relation to the rest of the cockpit, you have very good vision on the targets on approach and can maintain good vision on the targets through the entirety of the attack. So, at this point this convoy is pretty much shattered. However, I am carrying 2 more bombs, so I'm going to do a little bit more strafing and drop these bombs off before heading home. I have no reason to keep them for this particular flight. So we will go over a couple of other things about the aircraft that I haven't had a chance to mention just yet. So first is in regards to the engines. The engines on the A-20B are equipped with a 2-stage mechanical supercharger. Now this supercharger must be manually switched from first to second stage at 2,900 meters or 9,500 feet. Now the second thing is in regards to the fuel gauge on the A-20B. The A-20B only has one fuel gauge despite having tanks in both sides of the aircraft. Now in the real aircraft there is a switch next to the fuel gauge which the pilot can flip back and forth to select which tank he wants to pick up a fuel level from. This unfortunately is not an option inside of IL-2. What happens instead is every 15 seconds the switch will flick from the left to right hand tank, constantly updating you on the levels of both tanks as you're flying. Now I did mention during the takeoff that the upper cowl flaps are only for usage when on the ground, they're not for usage in flight. However, as you can see, you can use the lower cowling flaps perfectly fine. In fact, in this flight I've had them set permanently at 50% for pretty much all of the flight. It is worth noting, however, that having the cowl flaps deployed will affect the aircraft's aerodynamics and make the aircraft nose heavy, so you will need to retrim the aircraft to compensate for this in flight. And more than that, each time you change the cowl flap setting in flight, you will also need to retrim the aircraft to compensate each time, depending on your cowl flap settings. Now I'm sure you've noticed at this point that I have not mentioned the oil radiators at all with this particular aircraft. That is because the oil radiator control is directly linked to the cowling settings. So when you open the cowlings, you are automatically opening the cowlings for the oil radiators as well. So you don't need to worry about those. And probably the last thing to mention is just another quality of life thing and very useful for new players still getting used to IL-2. The A-20B is equipped with a siren that will go off anytime the throttle is set to a low power setting but the landing gear has not been deployed. Providing the player is listening for it, this should prevent any new players from accidentally belly landing their aircraft due to forgetting to deploy the landing gear. So, at this point all of our ordnance has been deployed, the convoy has been bombed and shot into oblivion, so we're just going to take a nice little cruise down the road here before we head back to base. So, after a short flight, it's time for the landing. Now, landing the A-20B is actually rather easy. It's not a complicated or difficult aircraft to put down, it's very forgiving, and it has a lot of flexibility on behalf of the pilot. I recommend about 50% flap for most approaches. It seems to be about the best area that I've been able to find so far. In this particular landing, I do extend the flaps out past 70. That was because, well, mainly because my approach speed was just a little bit too fast and I was using the flaps as a form of air brake. Landing speed should be between 150 to 170 kilometers per hour. That's 95 to 105 miles per hour, depending on flap setting, with the indicated stall speed in landing configuration being between 139 to 165 kilometers per hour. That's 86 to 103 miles per hour, again depending on flap setting. Ideally on touchdown you want to land with the nose elevated by about 3.5 degrees, and this is easily done by simply performing a small flare just before touchdown. Anyways, ladies and gents, this has been the A-20B for IL-2, the Battle of Kuban. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you very much for watching. I'm planning on doing a few more videos in this kind of a format in the future, so please let me know in the comment section down below what you think. As always, remember to check the video description down below for links to my social media, links to my Twitch, and links to my Patreon for those who would like to support the channel directly. And until next time, remember to click that like button, share and subscribe if you would like to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.